welcome back. One of the stories that is getting a lot of news lately, and God knows why, is this thing out of Chicago with Jussie Smollett. Now, I'm a Chicagoan, so I got a little feel for the city and what goes on there, and it's an amazing little story. Now, for those of you who might have been in a coma for the last few weeks, Jussie Smollett is a star of Empire on Fox television. And he, on the 29th of January, claimed that he had been mugged, beaten by two people who yelled out racial slurs, who made homophobic threats. They were wearing a MAGA hat, one of the Trump Made America Great hats. And they put a noose around his neck and just kind of beat him up a little bit. Certainly the kind of story that can happen on the streets of a city like Chicago. But, there was a little something that, I don't know, just didn't seem right, even when the story was first coming out. People were kind of scratching their heads. Well, as the story began to unfold, we discover that maybe it's not quite an accurate story. So it appears now that the two individuals that were involved in some way or another were two brothers from Nigeria. It appeared one of them was a personal trainer for Smollett. The other, I think, had a minor role on the set of Empire, where he starred. And they're now cooperating with police, and if you believe the stories that are coming out, and they seem to be credible, they've done the investigation on these guys. They said they've been paid. This was a setup, and that they went and bought the rope at a local hardware store. They bought some bleach, which they splattered on him. And I guess they roughed him up a little bit to make it look good. Now, why this happened seems to be related to something that happened on January 22nd. Smollett received a threatening letter. One of those letters like you see in the detective films where all the letters are cut out of a magazine. Well, he gets one of these, and there's a suspicious powder, never identified, but a suspicious powder that was in the envelope. He reported that to the police. Well, it didn't get a lot of attention. And as a matter of fact, the later report was that the fact that the letter didn't get a lot of attention is the reason that he decided to set up this phony mugging on the streets of Chicago. Well, as it turns out, everybody, when the first story came out, presidential candidates, the Democrats, the media, and particularly the left, jumped on this story as evidence of pandemic racism in America, pandemic homophobia in America, and most of all, the kind of nasty things Trump supporters would do. It's a narrative. It's a narrative that the Democrats and the media play over and over and over. But now, not so certain anymore. Seems that the whole thing was rehearsed. It was staged. They found magazines with the letters cut out. They found that there was a phone call between Smollett and one of the brothers shortly before the attack. Smollett originally said he would be glad to come back to Chicago and explain whatever needed to be explained. Now he's not so sure. Now, everybody said this was a racist incident. This was a homophobic incident. Well, you know what? I agree. It was a racist incident. It was pandering to racism. What Smollett apparently did was take the highly charged racial dialogue that goes on in this country, and he turned it around. He said, you know what? I'm going to do two things. I'm going to hurt Donald Trump and conservatives and Republicans and show about racism and homophobia in America. And I'm going to get a lot of publicity and sympathy. And he did. Oh, there were presidential candidates, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, crying for him, praying for his recovery. He got what he wanted. He got a lot of publicity. Unfortunately, he may not have gotten all the publicity that he wanted to get because it didn't stop with that narrative. It broke down. It failed. And now we see something that is not unique. It's something that happens. People put up these phony things, just like people put phony things on the social media. People act out in phony ways. We've had people who were left wingers who put swastikas on synagogues to make it look like it was the right wing doing it. That's been kind of in politics for years. This is a pretty good example. Not the first example. There was a previous comedian who claimed pathetically that he was involved in the 9/11 disaster. And he waxed eloquently about how he was spared in the moments, and he wasn't even close. He wasn't even near the thing. So we know people make up stories, and we can move on from this one. But let this be a lesson. Let us not be too quick to believe every ugliness that we think occurs in America, because you know what? There's a lot less ugliness than there is goodness, by far. And that's what we need to focus on. So there it is.